leading multi-tiered systems of support for school and district-wide success.
It's great to see everyone this morning. I am excited to be here and for this conversation talking about district-wide implementation of MTSS. I also love the conversations that folks were having and the call-outs about the MTSS and the thriving and the needs related to if your MTSS were like a garden. I thought it was very clever and also things that I hear around the country. And so I'm really interested in continuing those conversations and having a lot of discussion this morning. I do want to start just by giving you a little bit of the lay of the land of how this morning will go. We are going to have conversations until about noon, and in that time, though, I'm going to take 2 breaks because I think that we're all very busy educators, and I know that there are things probably happening in your buildings. I'm guessing things have not stopped today in your schools because you're here, and so I will take 2. We will take 2 quick breaks. About the top of each hour-ish, just to give you a little preview. But please, obviously, take care of your needs as you need to. We're also going to have several opportunities for you to have conversations at your tables. We are a rather large group, though, so as we do that, I will kind of call us back together. I'd really appreciate if we could come back together when we do. The captions will, and I'm guessing also the video will, pick up people's conversations pretty well, and so just for folks to know. All right, so here's what we're going to cover in the next 3 hours of things we'll be discussing. We are going to review some components of MTSS, but as I was going around and meeting some of you before, a lot of you have a lot of MTSS expertise. Many of you are focused on MTSS already in your districts. You're doing some things and you've been doing some things related to MTSS in your schools already. We're going to take a system level view of MTSS today. And so we're gonna really hone in on that particular way of looking at our MTSS system. And then we're gonna think about maximizing the use of our screening data and thinking about how to use that. And finally, we're going to really hone in on improving reading scores and thinking about Tier 1 in particular. And I'm going to try to give you something you can still use yet this spring in the last quarter of the year with a 40-ish, I'm guessing, days of school left that you have, so that we're running still toward those and taking full advantage of the days we have left with our students. So with that, we're gonna jump right in. I also like to start. So I had a great mentor once who said to me, and we were at a training, and they kicked it off, and I was a young leader, and I sometimes would sit in meetings and think about, like, I don't know if all of this is really pertinent to me. Some of it seems like it's really great for my teachers, but I don't really need to know this part. And so I'd be like, this would be a great time for me to do my email, and I'd look down at my phone, right, and I'd be like, I think this is a great part for me to do this other thing. Maybe I'll work on like my grocery list and these things, which is these things are very important, emails and grocery lists. And I think, right, this is a really important thing for my teachers to know, but it's not really part of my job right now. And I had a mentor once who explained to me, when you're in a training, Sarah, as a leader, you have a very important job. Your job is this. And she said these things, and I wrote them down, and these are those things, and I think it's brilliant. And so as a leader, this is our job when we are in sessions, that maybe we're learning about a new set of curriculum materials that our teachers are going to be using, that maybe we're not teaching in a classroom anymore. Maybe you're an instructional coach, or an MTSS lead in your buildings. Maybe you're a principal, but our roles are a little bit different sometimes. And so, but our jobs are severalfold. One, we need to decide, right? We need to be able to set the vision and the expectations as leaders to let teachers know, here's how this is going to look in our school. Here's what this is going to look like in our school versus maybe in other places. And we also need to know enough so that when we're in classrooms, we can spot examples and non-examples so that the feedback we give can be really specific and really helpful for teachers. The number of schools, I have the opportunity to be in a lot of different schools around the country, and the number of times that I hear from teachers and principals too, that principals aren't able to give really specific feedback because they don't really know and aren't comfortable with the curricular materials or aren't comfortable with. They just don't know enough about, in particular, reading right now. They don't know as much as their teachers, and they don't necessarily need to, right? But they need to know enough to be able to spot the examples and the non-examples when they're in place to be able to give feedback and great coaching. And then also to be able to proactively see, okay, during this session, as I talk today, being able to see, Sarah's talking about this, I can tell this part's going to be a barrier in my school. Like, this is going to come up as a big problem because of this structural thing that we have, because our teachers don't have some common planning time, or because our data, we don't have the visualization that our teachers aren't going to be able to look at data in a specific way. And so knowing that ahead of time helps you to be able to proactively identify that and plan ahead of time to prevent that from being the case. And then when you know enough to be able to, as regular barriers come up and teachers bring problems to you, to be able to effectively help problem solve those. So I want you to keep those things in mind as we go through today, the roles of leaders, and then feel free to steal this too. This is one I added on the plane yesterday when I was flipping through this. I realized I didn't have this slide in there, so it's not in your deck. But I'll resend the deck to Scully too, so that you have the updated that one. That's the only slide that's changed in the whole deck, I promise. From before. And so, yes, you have that. So those are our roles for today. So at your table, so we're gonna do first, before we do this, I want you to, today you're out of your buildings for a whole day, which is a lot. I want you to, on the note cards that you have in front of you, think about, knowing now our three goals for the morning. What will make it worth your day out of a building? What about this morning is going to make it worth your day out of the building? So what do we need to do? What do I need to provide? Like, what do we need to talk about? What is there? Is there a question? Is there a topic? Is there a specific thing that we could address? A specific, maybe a specific barrier that your teachers bring to you that we can do that will make it worth your day? Thank you very much. Just shout outs. What are a couple of the things that will make it worth your day out of the building? Yes?
Structures and templates for success.
Structures and templates for success. Thank you. Yes?
It came up again and again here, actionable steps.
Actionable steps. Actionable things we can do. Yeah. Thank you. A lot of examples for an independent study model. Thank you. Yes?
Upside down triangle.
An upside down triangle. Understand. Everybody knows what that means. See smiles. Yes?
We talked about aligning the system, so before school, like summer school, during the day, and then after school, like what does that look like as far as the whole system?
Aligning the system. Aligning the system. Thank you. Yeah.
Specific examples of how schools that you're working with are maximizing their screening data and improving reading scores.
Great. Great. So specific examples of how schools that I'm working with are maximizing their screening data and improving their reading scores with Tier 1. Yeah.
For small schools where we have like 3 teachers in
Yep.
elementary or 4 teachers in elementary trying to do all grades.
Yep, and really small examples from really small schools where there are like 3 or 4 teachers in all of the elementary who are doing things. I work with a very rural school in Alaska that like you fly in to get into the school. That is an example of that. Very interesting. Like yes, very interesting. Okay. So that's great. Thank you so much. And if you don't mind collecting those and like putting them on a corner, I really do I'll sort them during one of our activities to try to make sure and call back. Okay. So this is what I mean when we talk about system levels. So the book that you have, when you talk about, I think it's really creepy to talk about your book. I really do. It might seem weird that it's weird, but it really is. But you all have it. So it would also be a little weird if I don't. May I steal your copy for a moment? Okay. So in the back, one thing that I do want to call out, because somebody mentioned like templates and stuff, the back half almost is activities and then like agendas and data protocols. So you have a lot of, and then all of these are also available online. And so that's like something. And so you already have some of these tools. The other thing to note is that this whole book actually takes a system level view of MTSS. And that's why we wrote it. I have, for a very long time now, been working with schools that have what our friends in the back and lots of other people were smiling when they said it, what a lot of people referred to as an upside down triangle. And what I saw were places that were had a lot of frustrated and overwhelmed teams because they were helping students and they were working really hard to help students, but they weren't seeing their data improve in the ways that they were promised an MTSS would do, and the ways that they were promised doing evidence-based practice would do. And a big part of the reason is that they were approaching an MTSS in the student-by-student framework. And nobody was talking about, or some people were talking about, but there wasn't a succinct text that was really user-friendly in a way that I hope this it is, that would describe an MTSS in a really system level way. And so this book is a system level approach. So here's what this means. So let's imagine for a moment that you heard about an accident in your town, and everybody is fine. Nobody is hurt. So we're going to start there. But we could ask. You'd immediately think of some questions, right? We all want the tea about the accident, but we could ask some different questions. We might ask, like, was somebody on their phone? Did somebody run a light? Like, what happened? Or we could ask different types of questions. We might ask, I wonder how many accidents are at this intersection each year, and how does that compare to other intersections that have similar traffic patterns? So the questions that I ask about this accident are going to determine my next steps. If I ask questions about this particular accident only, right? If I just say, did somebody run the light or the stop sign? Then I might do a citation, which might be very appropriate, right? With somebody on their phone, it might be very appropriate. If I also ask a question about, I wonder, is this the first accident at this intersection this year, or is it the 10th? And other intersections haven't had any this year, then maybe we might notice that the lines are faded, or maybe it needs a 4-way stop, or who knows? I'm not a city planner. I don't know these things. These are things. And so we might do the actions we take next might differ if we ask a question about the individual situation versus a systemic view. And the same thing is true in schools. When we think about our data, we can ask student-level questions, and we can ask system-level questions. And the questions we ask will determine the next steps we take. If we never ask system-level questions, we will not take system-level actions. We just won't. So I want you to have a quick conversation at your table. When you think about your data, what do you most often ask questions about? Do you think that you ask questions more often as teams about student level, like when you look at your student, do you more often ask student level questions, system level questions, or are your teams asking both? Have a quick conversation at your table. Yeah, so okay, show of hands, whose teams ask more questions about student level, like at the student level? Yeah? Whose teams ask more questions at the system level? Yeah, fancy. Whose teams ask both? That's great. Okay, yeah. Okay, system. Yeah, that's great. So so today that's fantastic. So we'll talk about some of both today. We'll hang out a little bit more at the system level, but we will definitely talk about some of both. But I do encourage you to be thinking about both. As we look at MTSS, here's what we mean. I started to flip through the questions, and already there were some people who were like, we want a common definition. I want a common definition and understanding in our schools about a multi-tiered system of support. And so this is how we define a multi-tiered system of support. We define it as a multi-level prevention and intervention framework that uses data to support schools for resource allocation to address both educator needs and student needs. And this used to be the AIR definition. They have since updated it. It is very short and it's very nice now. And though what we did add, Stephanie, my co-author, and I, Stephanie Stoller, is the educator needs. Because educators are the ones who are doing the work, right? And MTSS, I often ask in presentations, like if I'm with a group for a whole day, one of the very first questions I'll ask is I'll do a poll where I will ask, like, okay, so what would your teachers say about your MTSS? Would they say that it helps them? Would they say that it's overwhelming, right? Would they say that it is mostly paperwork? Like what would they say, right? Like what will your teachers say about your MTSS? Because it should be supportive of teachers. That's the idea. It's supposed to be a system that's supporting both students but also our educators within our schools. So let's talk about what is included within this MTSS. So as we think about a multi-tiered system of support, Tier 1 are those resources that are available for everybody. So it's the standards-aligned, high-quality instruction that all of our students are getting. It's those high-quality curricular materials that we're using, the instructional strategies that every teacher, so if we're learning, maybe we've decided to use a common vocabulary routine to introduce vocabulary at the middle school, and that all of our teachers are using. That would be part of our Tier 1 then, if we're all using that. Maybe, and so that would be part of it, that evidence-based instructional strategies that we're using across for everybody. Our universal screening and common formative assessments are part of Tier 1 because everybody are using those assessments. And then your teacher collaboration time, so your PLCs, are also part of your Tier 1. So it's those resources that are serving everybody, your standards-aligned instruction. That's your Tier 1. So it's the foundation. It serves as the base, the strong base upon which everything else is built. And it really is intended to be preventative in nature. The whole concept of an MTSS was built upon the idea of prevention. Many schools come to an MTSS. I know that I actually started my career over 20, we don't need to talk about how long ago it was now, a long time ago, around this concept, well before it was called MTSS or RTI, around these concepts. And we started, though, on a very individual student basis, and we quickly realized in this work that it needed to be a system-level approach. And what it came out of, that system-level approach came out of, was the public health sector, and the idea that that prevention is the way that we have successful intervention. And so, if we think about it, like all of us go to the dentist multiple times a year. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, we would like to keep our pearly whites, right, for many, many years. That's the idea. We also, though, don't have in our communities enough dental surgeons for all of us to need root canals on the same week, right? Like if today all of us needed a root canal, we wouldn't all be able to get in because we don't have enough dental surgeons for that. We don't have enough Tier 3 resources for everybody to need them at the same time and that be successful. That's the idea behind preventative health, and that's the idea behind Tier 1 and an MTSS as well, that we don't have enough intervention resources for those resources to be successful for too many students at once. And so when we have what we refer to as an upside-down triangle, what happens in most of those schools that I'm in is that intervention services aren't successful. And schools experience over time that students who receive Tier 2 resources and Tier 3 resources don't ever seem to catch up. And so we stop expecting that Tier 2 and Tier 3 resources end up catching students up, and we become a little bit complacent, and we start to expect that students won't catch up when they start to fall behind. Because those resources can't, because we don't have the strong foundation for which to build of the strong Tier 1. Okay, Tier 2 then are targeted, that's our targeted interventions. Those are the extra instruction that happens in addition to Tier 1. We want it to be as targeted as possible to very specific student needs. And it's going to include any assessment that we might need to be able to target that instruction, but we want to be able to provide that extra instruction very quickly. That's the idea. The second we identify a student might need additional instruction, we want to be able to provide it. And we want to also be having some data, some additional data to tell us, is this working? So that we can identify when we might need to provide additional instruction or be able to send the student on their way because it's been successful. And then, so this is I liken this to my vitamins. So it's in addition to the healthy diet that I typically eat, right? I like the gummy vitamins. That's what I take. Every year I get more and more of them, it seems like. The older I get, the more vitamins I take. But I don't take them instead of meals, right? Even though they're very tasty, I don't eat them instead of the meals. I'm taking them in addition to. So the Tier 2 resources aren't instead of, they are in addition to. And then Tier 3 is the more intensive and individualized supports for some students, for a very few number of students. And those resources are all based on, again, individual student needs. It doesn't mean that they're individual because they're individualized. They're just based on the student's individual needs. So, but it still might be groups of students. We for sure want to be targeting, again, specific skills. So it's not everything. It's targeting specific skills. In addition to Tier 1 instruction, we're going to include, again, additional assessment, progress monitoring to make sure what we're doing is working so we can tweak it if we need to. What you'll notice I don't have here is anything related to, there's nothing related to programs, there's nothing related to, I'm looking to see if, oh yeah. So the goal of our interventions is fully to accelerate student progress. I already mentioned this, right? But it's worth mentioning again. The goal of interventions is to accelerate student performance. we want to make sure that our interventions are successful, that we're accelerating student performance. One of the, there's a whole chapter in the book and then a set of materials that you have, and we're not talking about this today, so I'm pointing it out now, that, and this is a great time of year to consider it, for interventions where you have some student data, or if you can just parse out, for interventions where you have, you know the students who are in the interventions, maybe you have like lists, like you have a database that tells you which students were receiving said intervention. If you can look at beginning of the year scores and end of the year scores, if you have some screening data for those students, maybe you use like STAR or you use MClass, I've heard both of those today, then you could look and see, and there's a data protocol and agenda that will, and look to see, okay, what % of those students who received this intervention have grown this year? Right? And you can see, okay, of our interventions, which interventions have been successful overall and which interventions haven't been as successful. And then you can start to, and so you're not looking just student by student anymore. Now you're asking at the intervention level, the system level, which interventions have been successful and which interventions haven't been as successful. Yes, yes, of course.
Generally speaking, I think in my experience, there's only one intervention method done at a time.
Okay, so generally in her experience, there's only one intervention method done at a time.
So would you compare over different years when they change?
Oh, so the question is, yeah, so there's only one intervention at a time. Yes, so I mean for all of the students receiving an intervention. So let's say we have a phonics for reading group at 4th grade. Then we have a group of students, maybe we have 10 or 15 students in 4th grade this year who've gotten phonics for reading. Then I might look and say, okay, of those 10 to 15 students who've gotten phonics for reading, how many of those students did we close learning gaps for this year? What percentage of those students have either maybe met SGPs if we use a screening tool that does that? Maybe they have students who have moved up a category if we're using a benchmark, a tool that, like an MClass that has benchmarks. And so I'm looking to see if students are accelerating their progress. And so I can look to see what percentage of students who receive this intervention are making catch-up growth. That's what I want to see. And meeting SGPs doesn't actually mean making catch-up growth, by the way. So we need to be careful about that. But that's a fully different presentation. But I feel the need to say that, as I know that's a criteria people put in place a lot, though. So it's a place to start for your teams, right? If that's what your teams are asking, that's the place I would start, because that's what your teams are asking already.
Sarah, will you define SGP?
Oh, sorry, student growth percentile. Yes, sorry, student growth percentile. Thank you. A lot of your teams might already, your PLCs might already be talking about that. If they use a screening tool like MAP or STAR, then that might be things that your PLCs are talking about regularly. So it would be something then that you could talk about with your interventions very naturally, right? It would be something that is a nice thing then to be able to move the team into, to start to, because what I don't want to do, that's an alignment thing, right? Like I want to keep it as close as I can to try to, in the beginning, to try to help people be able to make the connections that this is the same system we're talking about. And then I might help also start to ask other questions that will help them be able to make great decisions about moving things forward. But. Okay, this is a great place for me to stop talking. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let you, I was going to talk about one more concept, but I'm not going to. Okay, when we think about the tiers of it, I lied. I'm going to very quickly also, I'm going to go to one more slide because I feel like if I'm going to do this, I really have to tell you one more thing before I let you talk. And then I'm going to let you talk. Okay, so here's what it's not. The multi-level framework, that those tiers are not a program. There is not a tier 1 program, a tier 2 program, and a tier 3 program. There is not. Here's what I find over and over again. Your students who struggle with the tier 2 program, you magically don't put them in the tier 3 program and all of a sudden they take off. It does not happen. What tends to happen is they need more, we do, more, you do. They need like more, they need better instruction oftentimes. Like they need like more of the things, not like a different of the thing. I see people nodding. It's not a place, it's not a person, it's not a time of day. We didn't MTSS our children. And I'm guessing you can say other things, right? The biggest one, though, for me is that I hear a lot is like the program thing, that tier 2 is this program and tier 3 is this program. No, like our students need, like we want to try to target specific skills, and what you'll see is that we have students with different needs, right? And so so the programs aren't the thing. It's the needs that we're trying to meet that are the thing that we're really trying to do. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking now for real. Talk about the tiers specifically. Anything that's new or a good reminder that you want to take back that's going to be helpful in your schools. We're just going to take 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, because we've got more about the framework to talk about. A couple more things about an MTSS. So an MTSS, another piece of the definition that's really important to note in your schools is that it's a framework, not a roadmap. So when people ask you, it's like icebreakers, people will sometimes ask, what's your hobby? And I think it's a rude question. I have a career. I don't have time for a hobby. Maybe like someday, but not yet. Someday though. But my hobby, when I get asked, my hobby is girls' trips. And every girls' trip's a little bit different. For the gentlemen, it's probably like a guy. It's exactly like a guy's trip, I think, too. Every girls' trip's different, but there are some things that are common across every girls' trip. So we always have to think about and plan some common things, right? We always have to plan these things. For me, the most important is like, what will we eat? Because I get hangry. But these are, right, you always have to plan these things. And MTSS is exactly the same. There are some common things. Every MTSS, even in the schools in your same district, but for like online charters, for instance, it's going to look quite different, right, than an MTSS in an elementary school that has a building. Middle school in the same district is going to look different than an elementary school in the same district. And so it's going to look different in different schools, but we have to attend to these things, or we're going to see some gaps and we're going to have frustrated and overwhelmed educators. So we're not going to go into all of these today, but these are the things that we have to attend to as we think about an MTSS. We have to always think about our universal supports, our tier 1. We have to be always planning for tier 1 because it is the foundation. It is the strong base on which we build everything else. We have to plan for targeted intensification at every tier, which we will talk about intensifying tier 1 today. We have to plan for impactful assessment. We'll talk about screening and using screening data today. And then collaboration for success. I guess we are talking about, maybe we are talking about all of these. How are we doing that in the next couple hours? Now I'm nervous. We're talking a little bit about that related to screening as well. So all of these things we do have to attend to in order to see really good success. So it's a framework, not a roadmap. The big idea is thinking is required in order to set it up. And what you might focus on in a given year at a given point in time might be different, right? So you might in your building building really be focused one year on helping teachers use their assessment data, really focusing on, maybe you're really focused right now on impactful screening because of the literacy law, right? And so you're really, really laser focused on helping teachers use those data in your school, whereas another school in your district is really focused on tier 1 and making sure that students at a middle school level can access across any classroom, maybe can access the really rigorous core content that's happening across content classes. And so it might be different, right, in different schools, and that's okay. We just need to be thinking about that and be planning for it. And be able to explain, right, like here's our plan and here's why it might be different in different places. And then the last thing that we want to talk about related to the concept of an MTSS is this pyramid. We've already talked about the pieces of the pyramid, but I do want to talk about the pyramid itself. We talked about this last time I was here too. But many times we think of this pyramid as containing all of the students in our school. We talk about our red students, we talk about our tier 2 students, and when we think about that, I understand why we do that. And but some things can happen that that don't help us serve students well, don't help educators end up being in the best places to serve students well when we think like that. And so when you see this pyramid, I'd like you to think about it in a little bit of a different way. The pyramid was actually never intended to be about your students. The MTSS pyramid is actually about the resources in your school. So this pyramid contains all of the resources in your school, not your students. And it might seem like a semantic thing, but it's not. So what happens when we think about it as containing students is that we start to think things like, you know, there are some students who, you know, we've got this tier 3 student, and they're just always going to be a tier 3 student, right? And which means that they're always going to not be on track. And we do things, this doesn't happen in California, but I live in Illinois sometimes, and let me tell you, sometimes what they do in Illinois, they get their screening data, and teams will get together in data days, and they'll cross off students who have IEPs. I know, or they'll cross off students who are multilingual learners. They'll be like, well, these students already have some services. And so they aren't students that we're going to talk about if they need some interventions or some things. And they'll do that, right, for good. We understand the reasons, and like we're not saying, like maybe we should say, I wonder, like, are they making catch-up growth with the programs they're getting, or do we need to have a conversation about are the programs that they're getting serving them, right? Are they making enough growth? Are they making catch-up growth? Or are we assuming that this student is a tier 3 student and they're just always going to be a tier 3 student, that they can't make catch-up growth? Another thing that can happen sometimes is that we go straight to interventions being the solution. And so we say, you know, we need a lot more interventionists. We need a lot more time. Like we need more tier 2 interventions in our school. We need a lot more capacity. We've got a list of 70 students who we need to have time for this one half-time intervention coach to also, right, a TOSA who is doing 4 different jobs in the building, to now have like 4 classes worth of students, right, that they are now planning to fix this year. And so, and they're going to sub 3 times a week. And so, right? And so, I don't know if you're like, are you in our school? Like, when is she here? And so, right? So we go straight to intervention, and it's because we're taking that student view, right? We're not taking a step back and saying, like, we have so many students like maybe this poor Tosa is going to be running for the hills. Somebody's hugging their Tosa, I think, right now, because they're very, because we're overwhelming people. That if we look at this pyramid as containing our resources, then we would say, we have 70 students right now who, across maybe 2 grade levels, who need intervention. I wonder, where do we have the most resources in our pyramid? Tier 1. Where should we be looking to serve our students? Tier 1, right? When we have a boatload of students who have needs. Yeah, we need to ask, what can we do in Tier 1? And not that we're not going to then serve the students that we can serve reasonably well, right? And provide with intensive enough resources that we can close gaps with those more intensive resources. We're absolutely going to do that with that intervention, with that interventionist. We're going to let them do that, but we're going to do that in a way that we can actually close gaps, that those interventions can be intensive enough then that can close gaps. And then the final one, and this is one that has ramifications for students for the rest of their educational career, is that we can forget that Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions are intended to be supplemental in nature. So when we pull students out of Tier 1 to give them interventions that are intended to be in addition to Tier 1 instruction, what happens is that they miss out on the rich and important grade level standards-based instruction that's happening. And when they get to secondary, into secondary content, they can no longer access secondary courses that are rigorous in nature. And we have a whole bunch of students who have disabilities, who have a history of struggling in elementary school, who now can't take advanced classes in high school, not because they don't have the cognitive ability to do so, but because they don't have the background knowledge and vocabulary to be able to have the thinking skills to do so. Because our thinking skills are really based very heavily on our background knowledge and vocabulary. I can't think about things if I don't have background knowledge and vocabulary on that topic. And so when we remove students from Tier 1 instruction and replace it with that Tier 2 and Tier 3, that's what ends up happening when we do that for many years, is that students get so far behind in background knowledge and vocabulary that they can no longer problem solve and think about those more rigorous concepts that other students can. And then they miss out on those other classes. I can accommodate, I don't want to, by the way, I want to teach kids to read and then let them read in high school. And I can accommodate for a student who can't access the print a lot easier than I can accommodate for a student who can't access all of the background knowledge that they've fallen behind on for the last 6-7 years. But yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop talking and again let you have a very quick conversation about what are anything else that you want to take back about MTSS as a whole, and think about if you were one of the people who wrote down, you want to come back with a unified idea of an MTSS and some key things about what an MTSS means to us at your building. What are some of those key points that you want to take back? So we're going to shift topics a little bit and dig into impactful assessment. As we do, and think about, so impactful assessment isn't just assessment. It's not just the data we're using, but it's the thing that makes it impactful is being able to actually take action with the data, right? Like having data is one thing, but what I find now is that schools have a ton of data. Schools have a plethora of data. I'm not in schools that are like, Sarah, we have no data. Like where are the data? Nobody says where are the data, right? They're actually saying things like this. I'm hearing things like we spend too much time testing. We have a lot of data, but we're not using the data instructionally. Like my teachers, I hear from leaders a lot, my teachers have data, but I don't see them using data when I'm in their classrooms. We don't, our data, we have data, but they're not actually telling us what we need to know. I hear teachers say, I know that the district has data, but these data aren't helping me, or I can't even get to the data. I don't know where the data live. I think they're on a Google sheet somewhere, but I don't have access to that Google sheet. We collect too much data is a common one. I sometimes I'm in classrooms, and a lot of the reading curricular materials now have regular tests like every 5 or 10 lessons, and so I'll see teachers either use them, or I'll ask teams like, oh, do you guys use those? And I'll hear either one of two things. One, we skip those because we don't have time for them. Or we collect them, but we don't really use them, like, because we don't need them for our, like, we don't use them, like, because people think of them as like grading things, right? Like we think about them we should collect those and use them for grades. And so we think about, like, we have all these data, but we don't really know what to use them. So impactful assessment is really about being able to use the data that we have and be able to take action with it. So, and the other thing that I hear a lot is, Sarah, tell me which test to use. Like, which test should I use? Is this test good? Like, what do you think of this test? And generally, that is a trap, because I've learned this over the years. This is a trap, because either people know it's good or they know it's bad, and I went nowhere near it. But in general, here's the answer. The answer is, like, a test isn't good or bad. No test does everything, and tests generally have purposes. And so we have to understand, like, what does this test do well, and what doesn't it do for us? And you also we have to know that ourselves, and if you're a leader who does talk to vendors about different assessments, you have to know specifically what questions at the student level and at the system level do I need my assessments to answer right now? Like, what am I looking for right now in a new assessment I'm looking for? And what do I already have a test that does? Because the vendors, while they really are trying to help you, I really believe that. I do some speaking for some vendors. I really do believe they're trying to help you. They also do have a very specific product that they're selling. And so they're going to tell you about the things that product does, and they're going to try to help you. If you say, like, I need something to do this, they're going to try to find a way to say that it's trying to help you do that. And I go into a lot of schools that have multiple products that do the same thing. Or I go into schools that have products that they've been told do things that they don't necessarily do well, that they weren't designed to do. So we have to just know that. Okay, you have a document that says assessment. It has several columns: assessment, questions, and examples. And these are the general purposes that we're collecting data for in schools. I would like you to, at your table, have conversations and try to fill out. So, and you don't have to do all of these, but what are some of the questions or reasons that schools that you might use if you use these types of assessments? What are some of the reasons that you use these types of assessment? And then what are some examples? So if you do use it, what are the tests that you use? So somebody mentioned MClass. What do you use MClass for? What are the purposes for MClass off of this list? And then what are either the questions that you answer with it at either the student or the system level, or what's the like describe what you're using it for. I'm going to review these, and then I'm going to see if there are any questions that arose that I haven't already answered or discussion points that came up that I didn't answer from already from these. So, and I'm guessing some people have already looked ahead to the slides. That's good. So So here are the main ones that we see. So the first are those things that are curriculum common formative or classroom formative and curriculum embedded assessments. So these are those ones that we're using on a regular basis as we're teaching. So things that I'm doing during instruction. So I might have students while I'm instructing giving me a thumbs up, thumbs down to check their understanding. I might be using exit tickets and using those to determine if I need to continue to teach toward accuracy on a topic the next day, or if I can let students practice on their own a topic. I might be, so it's helping me identify what's my next instructional move. I can also use the curriculum embedded assessments, and the goal of those every 5 or 10 lessons isn't for my students to get a grade, but is really to help me know, should I go back and keep embedding the concepts from this week in like every lesson? Do I need to keep teaching those? So if I notice that students were inaccurate, if I had a big group of students that were inaccurate still after 5 days of teaching this sound pattern or whatever that might be from the last 5 days, whatever we were focused on, then I could know, oh, in the drills that are coming up for the next several days, I'm just going to keep weaving this one in, and I'm just not going to let it go, because I'm going to make sure not just to weave it in as many times as the curriculum has it, but I'm just going to keep doing it more, because I can tell that my students aren't quite firm with it yet. So it helps you know what my next instructional move should be and what I might need to reteach as I go forward. So that's what those are identified for. Screening helps me know where risk is. That's its only job. We're going to talk more about that. But screening's job is to basically predict the future. It helps us know for individual students, and then also at the system level, based on what's happening right now, in the future, are our students going to be on track or not? And the reason that we need this is because we're really good as teachers at doing that for students who are really high performing and students who are highly at risk. But for students in the middle, it's really hard for us to predict as teachers if they're going to be on track or not in the future, like a year or two in the future. And primarily because it's really hard for us to know. Like if I am a kindergarten teacher, and I've been a kindergarten teacher for a while, it's really hard for me to know what a proficient third grader at the end of the year looked like in kindergarten, and what their skills were exactly in kindergarten. And so screening does a really good job. It's what its job is. Okay. Progress monitoring helps us know if whatever instructional package we're providing is helping a student catch up. I use the term instructional package instead of intervention because students are receiving tier 1 plus their intervention. And I think when we say intervention only, then it places, again, all of the onus for fixing students on the interventionist that was getting a hug earlier. And in reality, it is tier 1 plus the intervention that's responsible for the student's closing of the gap, like for the student's trajectory improving, not just the intervention. The intervention's part of it, right? A big part of it, but it's not just the intervention that resulted in the student's learning. And then diagnostic measures are those that tell us about students' skills, strengths, and gaps. So it tells us about what students already know and what they still need to know. And then outcome data tells us what's the result of our instruction. So what happened, and then it also is what we use for our grades, right? Like what will our grades be? What are we gonna now? What was the result of our instruction? What will students' grades be? So these are the purposes. We're not going to spend time today on all of these purposes, but are there any questions that came up as you guys were talking, or anything that you were kind of looking sideways at, or anything that wasn't captured? Yes. Please. Yes, outcome.
You said that that's part of the grade is the outcome?
It can be, yeah, it can be. It doesn't have to be, but yes, it can be.
But not like stop, like even if grade would stop
Right. So STAR is a screening assessment. Yes. Yep. Is that what you would use? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I thought.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Just trying to, we always have a lot of questions on what should be the reading grade. And
Oh.
Using, like,
Ah.
how do we give a grade in reading when we're
Got it.
looking at all of these things?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what would an outcome assessment look like?
Yeah. So an outcome assessment. Yes. So an outcome. It depends, right? So, which is the hard part. So outcome assessments, a lot of times these are teacher-made tests, or like unit tests from curricular materials, are a lot of what outcome assessments are. So teacher-made tests, unit tests from curricular materials. Your state tests are outcome assessments. They're not the ones that grades are based off of, right? But they're the ones that determine like the result of instruction. And so those are like a lot of what we see. I'm guessing there are schools out there that use screening assessments for grades. That's not the purpose of a screening assessment. The purpose of a screening assessment is that. You have vendors that will also tell you that there are screening assessments that will diagnose specific student needs. We can talk about that, and I'll put it on a slide. It's on a slide. And I'm happy to talk about as much as or as little as people want. But yeah, so but the purpose of screening is that. Yeah. And to tell us, screening will also tell us how much students grew, right? Like it'll tell us how much students grew like between periods. Like people will also ask questions about program evaluation with screening. Like there are more questions, but like they're nice because they're technically valid assessments, and you could look at growth in between periods. Yeah, you can't answer more questions. I guess the slide should be longer. But their job is. Good question. Okay. So we're going to really hone in today on screening in particular, because I know that that's something that a lot of elementary schools in California are working with right now as a newer piece. Many of you have been screening for a long time, but you also have a new California literacy risk law that you have some specific assessments that are on a list. I became very familiar with the law last year and had the opportunity to do a few webinars for some orgs around the law, so I know a little bit about it. And so when we think about screening, here are some key things to know. So screening is, first of all, I do not see schools that get dramatic increases in student outcomes that do not screen. Screening is really important. It is a preventative practice because it allows us to predict the future. It allows us to see which students and which grade levels have a lot of risk before we get to the end. And so we're able to see, and in the winter it lets us see where growth is and where we still have a lot of risk. So it's really handy. We can answer a lot of questions with screening data. And it's very quick. It's fairly quick to administer too, so it's helpful. So this is what we need it to do technically, and the screening assessments on the market primarily do this really well. Like they don't really make it very far if they're not doing this. You can see how well they do it on their national sites. The National Center for Intensive Intervention is one of them that have kind of peer reviewers that review the assessments and will show you, like you can read all about them, but every vendor can give you technical manuals where you can see like how predictive they are, but this is their job. Chances are, I always recommend like asking, them to provide you with the data, but most of them now on the market, they are technically adequate at a basic level, but you always want to check or ask a trusted friend who knows statistics at the very least. Okay, some of them, but they're different types, right? So there are different types of these assessments. So how many of you use curriculum-based measures? Like MClass? Yeah, okay, so Yep. So curriculum-based measures tend to be those fluency measures, right? They have like the timing component. Yep. Computer adaptive tests, where they get easier or more difficult depending on how students are performing. Yep. And then some measure very specific skills for students. So they might measure at lower grades. Sometimes you'll see like a phonemic awareness measure, right? You'll see a potentially like a nonsense word measure. You'll see different measures that form a composite. So you'll see different things for different, so you might see different types of assessments that are screening. And then what you want to watch out for is watch out, and it doesn't mean not to use these assessments, but just be careful in interpretation. Watch out for interpreting too much. It's like reading just too much into these assessments. So vendors will make lots and lots of graphs because schools like them. And here's what happens. One vendor will make a pretty graph, and so then the next vendor makes a similar pretty graph. And so then the next vendor makes another different pretty graph, and the next vendor makes another pretty graph. And they'll do some correlational studies, and so the next one will do a correlational study. And then they'll do all these things, and they'll put these, and they'll continue to do that because schools like it. And I mean, that's fine. You just need to know what it's giving you and what it's not. So every time these vendors tell you that their screening data are actually diagnostic in nature, like give it the side eye a little bit. It doesn't mean not to give those assessments. I'm not trashing the assessments at all. But you have to be careful because the assessments aren't actually, just know what it's doing and what it's not doing. The assessments are not actually directly assessing each of those skills. And so it actually hasn't given students assessments in each of those standards that it is now reporting that your students have mastered or not mastered. And so, but what it's doing is saying of all the students who took these items, they tended to get these other items right, or they tended to get these other items incorrect. And so from that, we can extrapolate that they likely do or don't know these standards. And so it's kind of like, it's all correlational in nature, and it's kind of several steps removed. So it'll give you lots of really nice graphs that are diagnostic in nature, but it's not actually diagnosing anything. And so just be careful. They do it because teachers want, because we want our tests to do everything. And so that's why they do it. But its job isn't to do everything. Its job is to tell you about risk. And yeah, and they do a really good job of that. They do a very, very good job of that. A very, very good job of that. I mean, and so I definitely recommend doing that. Okay. Yeah. Oh, the other really hard part about screening is that it's really hard to wrap our heads around the fact, and teachers see this all, we don't have to screen everything we teach. So in reading, you do not have to screen every single skill that you're teaching. And your teachers will sometimes ask you, like, okay, but how do I screen? And then they'll bring up the next skill that they're teaching, or the next skill. We don't have to do that. The purpose of screening is to know overall what the overall risk is. We're using the crystal ball. Measures do a really good job of that without having to measure everything. That's why they're amazing, is because they don't have to measure every single specific skill. And they've been being tested for decades and decades now. And so it's not like somebody watched a TikTok and then made a test and published it, right? Like that's not what happened. Like these have been, they've literally have come from 5 decades of research now. And so like they're very, very strong at what they do. And so, yeah, so they, you can trust that you don't need to measure every single skill to be able to predict. Now, you do need to then test the skills that you're then going to teach, right? That's not screening though. So it's right that a teacher needs to know about a specific skill that we're teaching, but that's not screening. So screening, yeah. So if you are talking to parents or teachers and you're like, how am I going to take this back, this idea of screening? I like to connect it to well child checkups. So if you have parents that ask, Why do you have to screen my child? They're on track in reading. They've always been on track in reading. Why are you doing this 3 times a year? Or why are you screening my kindergartner? They just got here to kindergarten. Why do we screen in the fall of kindergarten? They haven't been taught yet. The reason we screen is just like a well-child checkup. It helps us know not only is your child like growing and meeting all the standards, right? We go to the doctor whether we're healthy or not, whether we're sick or not, every year, because it also tells us if your child is growing enough to stay on track. And so we just want to make sure that our instruction is providing a standard of care that your child is also growing enough to stay on track. And so we do screening with everybody 3 times a year or whatever it is, so that we make sure that that's the case. Okay, so let's talk about screening in California. So I suggest when you think about your teachers and helping your teachers in your schools specifically, I want to think about 2 things. Your teachers are going to need support to interpret the data, which I'm sure you've come across, and then also to take action on the data. We don't want to just have the data, we also want to be able to take action on the data. So to interpret the data, I recommend having some way to help them know, here are the reports that you want to use, like telling them specifically, look at this report, right when you get the data, give them the questions to answer. Again, you can use the agendas and data protocols to give you some ideas if you want to that are in the book. And then I always, for screening meetings, especially in the fall, will have 2 meetings. I have 1 meeting that focuses on just Tier 1, and then 1 meeting that focuses on interventions. Because what I find is that interventions are the sexy part of MTSS. And once people start talking about interventions, they never want to go back to Tier 1. We don't go back to Tier 1 once we start talking about interventions. And so the first meeting, we focus on Tier 1 and what we need to do for Tier 1. Then we come back and talk about interventions. And then when you do have a winter meeting, if you have data 3 times a year, your screening data, in the winter, have a conversation. Don't do an apple cart upset with interventions. Talk about and identify growth, right? And then look to see what are our Tier 1 needs? Do we have any changes that we need to make with Tier 1? And then do we have any students who need to exit from interventions? Do we have any students that we need to add to interventions? But don't apple cart upset and start all over with interventions at that point in time. Because here's what ends up happening. We have students who are making good growth in interventions, and we end up taking them out and before they've actually caught up, and now we've taken them out of the thing that's working for them. And that's like the hardest part of education, is finding the thing that works. And so we need to keep them in the thing that's working until they are caught up, if they're making catch-up growth. Yes, was there a question? Okay, there was not a question. Was there a question? Okay. And then finally, so that's interpreting. We want to give teachers the tools to interpret. The second thing we want to do is help them take action on the data. We want to give them things that will help them know the next steps. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but basically give them some ideas. Teachers aren't waiting around. It's like teachers aren't saving their best ideas for next year. Like, they're just not. And so if they knew what else to do, they'd already be doing it, right? And so nobody's waiting. So we have to share like some of the ideas of things. And it might not be those things that they do, but it'll help spur some other thoughts about the things that we might focus on. Help teachers, empower them to set action plans, to decide what to do next, and then make sure that they have support to be able to do that. If they decide that they're going to think outside of the box, like somebody mentioned earlier, and say, hey, we identified that we have 3 different sets of needs at our grade level, and we want to be able to trade students to be able to, during a win time or whatever it it is to be able to give them exactly what they need. But we currently aren't set up to do that. Like, how might we, being able to problem solve and support that would be, right? I would want to help try to do that. And so giving them support to be able to do that. Okay. And here's what I'm guessing you see, is that you might have lots of grade levels where you see this. You have a lot of students who are at risk, right? That upside down triangle that people mentioned, right? We have a lot of students who are at risk. We have a lot of students, but we don't have a whole bunch of extra intervention resources. And so in California, what you have is, in the law, it suggests that you can then provide evidence-based literacy instruction focused on the pupil-specific needs. What you don't have in your law that a lot of other states have, which is great, I think, that you don't have it, is it doesn't require an individual intervention plan, which is kind of great. But I still tell the same thing to states that do have it. But you do have this in your law, an evidence-based literacy instruction focused on the pupil's specific needs. So your law, that's why it's there, right? That's why you have a screening law that the vast majority of states have, is because prevention is the goal, right? That we want to be able to know so that we can take action on these data. And so here's what I would do. If I'm in a situation where we have a lot of students who have needs, I'm going to look to Tier 1 to meet those needs. And then I'm going to put in place a Tier 1 plan, and I'm going to help support teachers to meet those needs with Tier 1. So that's what we're going to talk about next, is how to do that. And you have an example, and then you can also download it, and you have the electronic version already. Yes, you have the electronic version too. So here's what I would do. I would make sure that grade level teams have an electronic version of something. It does not have to be this. Take this and then change it however you want to make it appropriate for your school, right? That's what we do in education. That lets them make a plan for their classroom of what they're going to do. But the idea is that we want to intensify Tier 1, and we're going to pick a very specific skill that is aligned to our students' needs in reading, and we're going to document exactly, we're going to have a plan for how often we're going to do it, what we're going to do, and when we're going to do it, because in schools, if it's not planned, it's not going to happen, right? It's not going to be, I'm going to do some extra practice in reading. Well, when, right? Like when and how. It's not just going to happen magically. And then also, what I'd love to, like, the next step, it might not be the first time, but the thing in the leader's mind that I'd like to have in the back of my head for, like, the second round is to find a teacher who's really, like, crushing it and who's asking for more, that I can start to get a progress monitoring plan for those students who are at risk, right? So for those students who were below target, I want to start progress monitoring them. I'm not going to lead with that, though, especially if I'm in a school where we haven't been progress monitoring regularly. I'm not going to lead with that. But I am going to be watching for the teacher who's crushing it, who's super excited about the progress of their class. And then I might have a conversation if I'm a coach or an MTSS lead and say, hey, like, would you mind, I see you've been crushing this. I'm really, like, you've mentioned the progress your class has been making. Would you mind if I monitored a couple of your students who were below benchmark? Like, let's look at your class and notice all the students who were below. Would you recommend a couple that I could progress monitor? And then as I do that, a lot of teachers would say, like, well, there's other students too. Do you mind if I progress monitor some of those students? And so then now both of us are progress monitoring some of the students, right? And we're getting some of these students some regular progress monitoring, and we're able to see that growth. And now we have some stories to tell about how effective these extra Tier 1 practices are. And we've got now momentum that's building in the school. Okay. So this is what, I mean, you can see the class-wide intervention form. Be looking at this as we're talking. So this is just a Tier 1 intervention form. all this is think about it as intervention. It's intensification, but it's for everybody in the class. We're providing something extra for everybody. So it doesn't preclude us from providing tier 2 or tier 3 intervention for some students. But if I have too many students who need that, I need to be able to provide something at tier 1 too. Okay, let's talk about what we know from research. So if you are looking for the research on this, this has a long history of research that dates back to the 80s, maybe even the late 70s. And in the research, it's called class-wide intervention. I call it tier 1 intervention usually, but you'll hear me pop between both. And basically all it is extra practice. Here's what we know. There's not enough practice in education in our curricular materials. If you think about it, like the first thing that we will say to like our kids, maybe not you, but many of my friends, the first thing we'll say to our kids if they're not getting better and complaining about not being as good as they would like in a sport or a musical instrument is, well, are you practicing as much as your friends, right? And so like we value practice so much. We know how important practice is. Practice is super duper important in reading and math too. And so we want to think about that as well. It's provided to everybody. And so we want to make sure that we're providing that teacher-led practice. And typically it has standard protocol. It just means that we plan what we're going to do, right? So you'll see at the bottom of that, that's why I have at the bottom of that plan the essential components. So what we're going to do every day. And I'll give you some examples. What it's not differentiation. We're doing that already. Differentiation is what we're providing to everybody to meet the lesson that we're teaching today, right? Differentiation are the changes that I'm doing in my lesson to help kids meet the learning target that's on my whiteboard for today, for the lesson today. That's differentiation. This is what I'm doing in addition to help students meet and catch up, right? The intervention that I'm getting everybody to catch up because we need to make accelerated growth. Okay, here's what we know from the evidence base, from the research base, that these are the components that are evidence-based in class-wide intervention. So having guided practice, so extra practice with feedback. So that means that I know when I am, like if I'm on track, if I'm not on track. That means, so with corrective feedback, that could be from a teacher, that could be from a peer, that could be from a computer program, right? So somebody mentioned like independent study earlier. So that practice could be, an independent study might be like computer-based. The thing that I would want if it was a computer-based program to be doing is one, I would want to be watching very closely participation. So I'd be watching very closely as the student completing the number of minutes, the number of lessons that are shown to be effective with that computer-based program. The other thing that I would want to be watching is like motivation. So I would want to be like making sure that I'm building in reinforcement and motivation pretty heavily into that, because by the time we have students who are behind, I don't know about any of you, but if I knew that I was bad at a job for several years, I'd move on to a new job, right? We have students who are in school for 13 years. They've learned. I've had first graders tell me that they know that they're the worst at reading in their class. And I'm guessing some of you have too. Like, they know that they're the worst and they're in school still. Like, the motivation problem is not their problem. That is my problem. And so I am the one responsible for making sure that they're engaged and motivated. And so that's the other piece that I'd be thinking about if I were doing independent study with that. Okay, so guided practice with corrective feedback, a high dosage of opportunities to participate. That just means everybody needs to be doing everything. We're going to talk about more examples of that. Materials that students are accurate with but haven't yet mastered, that just means it can't be too hard, right? I need students to be able to be successful. And then I want it to be reinforcing. I need to reinforce students participating. I need to reinforce their engagement. Teachers are fantastic at this. This is one where I have teachers within the school share their ideas regularly with others about things that they're doing to reinforce and to keep students engaged. I have a teacher in one school right now who she has like the best part, like the partner group that's doing the best at whatever behavior like she decides that day. So whether it's like the helper, the person who's doing the best helping that she decides, the person who's doing the best whatever it is, like the thing that she's looking for that day, she announces at the beginning that person gets to pick the brain break for that they do later in the math lesson. It's a math class-wide intervention, but and so they do, and so you can decide, right, like how. But teachers have great ideas for how they do that engagement piece. Okay. And here's some data. So somebody mentioned, like, what are people doing? This is class-wide tier 1 intervention is the thing that schools that I work with get the most growth in, period. Like, period. In 1 year, I would say in the past 2 years, 5 schools that I've worked with have seen dramatic growth in 1 year's time doing class-wide intervention. And it's like in 1 year. And this is, you're gonna see one piece of, like one school's data, but this is from 1 grade level, 2nd grade, and in 1 year, these are from screening data. In 2nd grade, their fall started with 29% of students hitting the benchmark target. They used FastBridge. And then in spring, they had 61% of their students hitting benchmark target in 1 year. The only thing they changed is they implemented tier 1 intervention. They wrote me, this was 2 years ago, they wrote me at the end of last year and said that in there they have 12 elementaries in their district. She said that last year they continued to do like that. And she said of their elementary schools in their district, they made the most growth of any of the elementary schools that year. And they are historically like the lowest performing, historically the most needy. And she said they continue to make the most growth, and they attribute it to tier 1 intervention. Because they're impacting everybody, right? They're helping every student, not just a few students, and they're not relying on just a few interventionists to support students. It's every classroom, every student. So some other things I'm gonna see. Oh, here's some. Okay, so this is one example. I'm gonna provide another example too, and then we're gonna take a break. So I'm gonna provide a secondary example. I'm gonna see what this. Okay. So I'm going to leave this on the board, but I'm going to talk about a secondary example. So a middle school that I worked with, we did one where they had they had too many students who needed intervention, and so what they did was we taught teachers 3 different routines that were all partner routines. They weren't all partner routines. They were all routines though that were evidence-based for getting students extra practice in reading. And one was partner, and then one was choral, and then one was two were different partner routines, and one was a choral reading routine. And and then teachers got to pick their material every single day that matched the lessons they were teaching, and then they got to pick which routine they used. And but they were expected to, in every class, spend 5 minutes having kids use, like in text, reading like eyes to print. And in one kind of period from fall to winter, they saw, again, like really dramatic growth. But they were a 6-section middle school, so kids were getting like 30 extra minutes of reading a day. And I was not popular the first day, like the PD, it was an after school, like Wednesday PD day, when I trained and we kind of ruled it out, right? So it was not popular that day. But in winter, when we looked at the screening data, like teachers were much more receptive. And teachers asked them, like, are we continuing this? Like, what's going on? And I said, well, now, like, actually, you don't have to, you are actually at the level now where you're gonna be able to intervene with the students. So it's up, like, it's up to you. And like we polled at the end of the year, most of the teachers continued it. And they said they thought the students were reading more in class than they probably were reading outside of class. And they liked the strategies because they knew everybody was reading. And so, yeah, so that's a middle school example of everybody, of class-wide intervention. So anything you can get consistent across classes is fantastic. That's tier one. That's tier one intervention. It's helpful for everybody, right? It's helpful for all students. It's really necessary for our students who are at risk in reading. And then a high dosage of opportunities to participate is a really important part of it. That means that everybody has to be doing the work. We're going to spend the majority of the rest of the time after our break talking about what we know about how we learn. But the bigger, better deal is, I don't know if you guys, I mean, you might want to lean in for this. In other states, this might be different in California, but in other states, when a student's talking, not all other students are listening. I mean, yeah, gasp, right? It's right, and so when students aren't learning when one student's doing the work, students are learning by doing it. And so students need to be doing the reading, the writing, the talking. They don't need to be listening to other students do it. They don't need to be listening to the teacher do it. They need to be doing it. Now, they need the model, right? But then they need to be doing it. So if you're in teachers' classrooms as a leader, this is like the leader piece now, right? If you're in teachers' classrooms and there's a lot of hand raising, there's a lot of popsicle pulling, I don't tell teachers not to do that. What I coach is, first, have everybody do it. Have students write it or talk to a neighbor about it. Then do your calling, do your popsicle stick pulling. But first, have everybody do it. Because everybody's only the students who got the popsicle pull, who got called on, did the learning. Okay. And so you have some examples of class-wide interventions in reading here. A couple of these are published. PALS reading is actually, the two that are published are very affordable. They're both from universities and have been studied. PALS reading is actually where class-wide intervention started. And I even, if you're like a coach and you want some fun summer reading, or you have insomnia, it's kind of, I recommend it just for that, because, not for summer reading, but I recommend it because it has a fantastic way. It teaches kids to work in partners starting at kindergarten, and it does like 2 weeks worth of lessons of just kids working in partners, and it's amazing at it. And so even if you don't use PALS for class-wide intervention, the partner part is fantastic, and it's not expensive, period, and can be used with any curricular materials. And then you have a couple other like things that are not programs, and then PRESS is another program, but it's out of University of Minnesota originally, and so, but it's again not expensive, non-spawn for all of them. But yeah, so those are some for you. You've earned another break. We're going to come back at 18 after on the dot, and then we're going to close out really strong with something really fun that, again, like action-packed with things you can take back. So in true Sarah Brown fashion, I always think that I have not put in enough content. And every single time I have put in too much. You would think after as many years I would learn my lesson. So here's the fun part is you've got lots of slides for many days that you can use. The other news is if you're following along with the slides, you're going to be annoyed, but that's okay. But I want to lean on a concept, and then we're going to go to like ideas. But the other piece to think about as you think about if you want teachers to, as you think about this idea of supporting teachers to improve tier one and to do tier one extra, like tier one intervention, intensifying tier one, we have to provide support. And then we also have to think about we need to provide support, and then also think about how are we also supporting with accountability, right? Support builds a bridge. Accountability makes sure that we cross it, right? I have a friend. I'm supposed to be lifting heavy weights, apparently until I die now, because I'm old and a woman, and so I have to, like, I know the answer. I have listened to the podcast. I've read the books. I understand the things my doctor has told me, and like just having the support, knowing the things has not been enough for me to lift the heavy weights. I also need an accountability buddy to like do it with me, like, and to like be watching it on my watch to make sure that I've done it, or she will text me and scold me, and I will do the same for her so that we get it done. And so accountability is part of it. So I do encourage you to think about that, and not like in a like you didn't do it way, right? But just thinking about how are we going to support our teachers to do it. So you do have some ideas for both of those both of those things, and I do encourage you as teams to think about that and to build those pieces as teams as you work together, and plan for either next year if it's something you're going to roll out, or whatever that looks like. So you do have support with that, because we're really not, teachers aren't trying not to do things. Teachers aren't trying to not make use of their data. Teachers really are just doing the best that they know how to do with what they have. They really are trying their best ideas. There's just a lot to do, and when they get data that isn't telling them that, hey, we're like everything is going really hunky-dory, then what they often are trying to do is explain the data, right? They're not making excuses. They're trying to explain it because they don't know what else to do. So they're explaining it. And so we have to find ways to support them through that. You have some examples. That's why you have several pieces of things. But what my biggest recommendation with that is to try to build teachers' supports. So give them time to work together. Give them resources like agendas and data protocols. And then give them tools that help them think about what to do next, and ideas of things to do next. So things like, here are some instructional changes that you might make, and then that will help them even think about what other things they might do. And then as a school team, then celebrate successes and what we did to get the success, or identify as a team what were barriers. Maybe we weren't able to do the class-wide, maybe we're gonna do tier 1 intervention. We weren't able to do it every day. What got in the way of that, right? It's okay to have those conversations. Schools are hard places to get things done in. Like, let's talk about that and move forward, make a plan, and go forward. It's okay. It is what it is, and we're gonna move forward and try to remove barriers. So those are some tips, but we are gonna really dig into instructional practices now for the last 35 minutes, and really because we can talk about the what we teach, which is what we spend a lot of time in schools talking about. We spend a lot of time talking about like the standards that we're teaching, the skills that we're teaching. But what we know is just as important is how we teach it. Because for students to learn those things, we have to be giving them access to it. They have to be able to access those things in a meaningful way. And what we know is that we have some students who I used to joke that you could have put me in a trash can with a book and I would have learned to read. I think I was that child. But most of our students are not that. Right? I know, doesn't that sound awful? I don't say it anymore, although I just did. So I don't know why. I used to say it. I don't say it because of like the face that she just made. She's like, that's awful. I know, that's why, and I was like, I know, that's why I don't say it, but then I just did. Okay, but here's what we know. Most of our students actually need good instruction. It's not just our students with disabilities who need good instruction. It's not just your students in intervention who need explicit instruction. Over half of your students need good instruction. So all of our students need access to good instruction. This is the how. That's what we're going to talk about now. How many of you have seen the instructional hierarchy? Oh, more than most. See, this is why we love coming to SCOE. So this is how our brains learn new things. This is the research about how we learn something new. So how many of you have taught a teenager to drive? Yeah, collective moan, yes. So we don't start like on the interstate, right? And here I can just stop there. I can just stop like on the freeway. Like in the Midwest, you have to say like during rush hour. Here, you don't even have to say that. You can just say on the freeway, I think, right? I would guess. No, we start like in a parking lot. We start with the car completely off, right? We're trying to learn, like what do all the knobs do? Like where are the windshield wipers? Where's the turn signal? We're building accuracy. Once we're accurate with a skill, that's when we can start to build automaticity. We have laws about how many hours we have to drive and practice behind the wheel to get automatic with those skills. And once we're automatic, that's when we can generalize and adapt our driving skills to situations like when there's rain, or the scariest, when our teenagers have like friends in the car, right? And so these are like, this is the order in which we learn new things. And there's like a few things that are really interesting about this. One is that it's how we learn everything. Our brains don't actually learn different things differently. So it's not like our neural pathways are like, so my teacher is teaching reading right now, so this is the way I learn to read. And oh, now I'm learning piano, so I learn this way. And oh, now I'm learning math, so I'm going to learn this way. No, we learn everything the same way. Just like if I'm eating breakfast, lunch, or dinner, my body digests food the same way. Our brains learn new things the same way. And so we learn things the same way. That's like one really cool thing. The second really cool thing is that accuracy isn't mastery. I want you to say that with me. Accuracy isn't mastery. Mastery is actually accuracy and automaticity. So accuracy isn't mastery. How many of you do your taxes yourself? Anybody here do? Yeah. How many, keep your hand up if you feel really confident about doing your taxes every year yourself. Like feel really confident, yeah. Fewer hands, some still, but fewer. Yeah, so I do my taxes, right? I, every year, like have to like click the question mark like a lot because I only do it once a year. And so while I mean, so far so good on being accurate, right? But I'm not really confident about it, and I'm sure I haven't mastered it because I don't do it often enough to really be automatic at it. It's not automatic for me. So I haven't mastered it. I don't know, when I started consulting full time, I couldn't really generalize and adapt my knowledge of tax law to understand all the nuances of it. Or like when we moved states, I didn't really understand, I wasn't able to generalize and adapt my knowledge to understand what to do in those situations because I just didn't have a mastery of it. And so accuracy isn't mastery, accuracy and automaticity. So that's also why like your M class is timed, because accuracy alone doesn't tell us everything. There's a difference in the child who can tell me all the letter names and a child who can look at a letter and name it automatically, right? There's a difference in those two students. It doesn't necessarily tell me what to teach tomorrow, right? But that's not the purpose of screening. It's not its job. And so different jobs, it tells me though something, that it tells me accuracy and automaticity. So accuracy and automaticity. So that's like the first like really cool thing. So it tells me something. The other really cool thing about this is that the instructional strategies that are effective are different depending on where we're at in our learning. So when we are learning to be accurate with something, that's when explicit instruction is really helpful. But once we're accurate, it's no longer needed, and it's really not that helpful anymore. And so it's not that like inquiry and productive struggle are good or bad, or that they're best in science and they're bad in reading, and like this like type of instruction is best in this subject. And no, our brains learn everything the same, right? But what is different is where we're at determines what instructional strategies are best. So if, like, for instance, my husband is a passenger prince. You know. So if we are like in our hometown and I'm driving us to dinner on a Saturday night, and he says, go left up here, I wouldn't. But a less patient wife might say something like, oh, you want me to pull over? Would you like to drive tonight? I would never. But if we are on vacation, I'm driving a rental car, it's really busy, and even if I have Google Maps up and he says turn left, then I would be really grateful, right? Because I'm not really accurate in this place. I'm happy for the explicit instruction in that moment. If I am putting up, I'm not that, like if I'm putting together a piece of IKEA furniture, I like the model. I recently put up some Billy bookcases, and I like watched a YouTube video of how to attach them to the wall, right? I like watched a YouTube because I wanted the model. I probably could have productively struggled my way through it, but I wasn't that interested in doing that. I didn't think it was going to be more fun for me because I'm not really into like construction projects. If I was interested in that kind of stuff, then it would have been fun, right? If I have more, like if I'm more adept at that, if I have more accuracy and automaticity, like more interest in that topic and more background knowledge in that topic, then it would be really fun for me to do that, right? Then I would enjoy that inquiry and figuring it out. And you watch the YouTube videos and some people are like, here's how to like add crown molding to your Billy bookcase. And here's how to, right? Like they have all those other things you can do, like the really cool things. Those are the people that are generalizing and adapting their knowledge of that, right? I'm not there. I'm just trying to figure out how to make it not fall on myself when I put books on it, and when I go to dust it. And so this is what we know about how we're learning new things. When we're learning to be accurate with something, that's when more teacher support's helpful. When we're more proficient, that's when less teacher support's helpful. When we have more background knowledge. So accuracy, that's when explicit instruction's helpful. The I do, we do, you do. We're going to look at some examples of that soon. Then automaticity, that's just practice. That's what builds automaticity is practice. Practice, practice, more practice. That's miles behind the wheel. If our kids could learn to drive by watching us drive, right? We'd be doing that, but they have to drive. Our kids have to read, they have to do the math, right? They have to have practice to do it. They have to do it themselves. They have to have the practice to do it. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. For those, I mentioned 3 things, right, that were pretty cool about the instructional hierarchy. At your tables, talk about any new learnings, things that might be helpful back in your school about how we learn new things, and as it applies to reading too, as you think about your students in your school. All right, let's talk about accuracy instruction first, and I'm going to show you a couple videos too. So accuracy instruction is when that model, the I do, we do, you do, is super effective. I'm just going to hit, raise your hand if you've heard of explicit instruction, I do, we do, you do. Right, Holger, yep. So I'm not going to go through all of it, and I'm going to hit some things that are like the hard parts that we see in schools a lot right now. So a big piece of it is everybody needs to access it. So the students that you need to learn are the ones who need to be doing the we do and the you do. So if only some of the students are doing the we do, only some of the students are doing the you do, then it's not actually explicit instruction, right? Not everybody's doing it. The other thing that sometimes happens is that we don't actually correct errors. And so other people see that too. Okay, so I'm not even going to talk about that. Okay, I have a couple examples. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show 2 videos in a row because I know some of you are middle schools. And then after, one is an elementary example, one is probably upper elementary, middle school. And I want you to think about what about these videos would help students become accurate. So what about the instructional strategies would help students become accurate? That's what you're thinking about. I will tell you up front that these videos are from the UK. They are not from California. That is because they use really great instructional strategies that I think are helpful for watching this. They also are from the UK. They are from public schools in the UK, but the students are wearing uniforms. They have different classroom management styles and techniques than we do in most of our schools. And I am not trying to suggest that I think your schools and classrooms should look like these classrooms. I just think they're helpful examples of instructional strategies for the conversations at your tables today. So that's the whole purpose of them. I don't want you to walk away and say, Sarah Brown thinks, because you are going to notice right away. You're going to say, this is the best behaved classroom I've ever seen. Does Sarah think? And so we are just preempting that. Yes. So I'm going to show 2 videos, and then you're going to have the conversation at your table.
I've got some things to start with. Car. Cow. My God, you can see there's a picture of a caterpillar. Caterpillar. This is a very curly caterpillar. Oh, when you see this side of a card, you're going to say caterpillar. How do I go curl around the caterpillar. Off you go. Off you go.
Before we start reading, let's do some explicit instruction of vocabulary. Now, yesterday, I didn't feel like I had 100% of children giving me 100% energy when we were doing the my turn, your turn of vocabulary. It's really important that you're saying the words aloud, because then when you come to read the text, you'll be able to read more fluently. So can I have that oomph of energy, please, from everybody? Flanked. 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 If you flanked something or someone, it means you go either side of them. This chair and this basket flanks me. It's either side of me. To flank is to go either side. To flank is to go? Either side. Oh, so much better. Harbour. Harbour. The harbour is the bit of land that a boat goes next to. So when the ship that is travelling up north with Lyra and the Egyptians on it, they sail into the harbour so that they can get off the boat. Harbour is the bit of sea next to the land. Harbour is the bit of sea next to the land. Avidly. 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 If you do something avidly, it means you do it with great interest or enthusiasm. I avidly watch the runner sprint down the track. I avidly watched my favourite TV programme. What type of word is avidly? Very few for aspire. How do we know that avidly is an adverb? Fizan?
They're taught not to raise their hand. They don't raise their hands. That's why they
Very few for aspire. How can we up-level Fizan's answer? The ending is ly. What's that ending called? 3, 2, 1. A suffix. A? Amazing.
Okay. Okay, at your tables, have a conversation about either video. What were things that you noticed that would that would help all students become accurate? And I'm going to ask for a couple of call outs in just like a minute, not even. What was something that you saw that would help students become accurate? Yes. Lots of opportunities for choral response. Yeah, lots of repetition. Yes.
I'm just curious, are these embedded at all? Like, will we be able to watch them?
The videos, so the videos are, it's a subscription service. Yes, it's a subscription. Reading Universe though has really great. If you're not on the Reading Universe site, Reading Universe has a lot of really good, has some good videos too. They're longer, and so that's the yeah.
I saw lots of like repetition of modeling.
Yes, yes, modeling.
Strong visual support.
Strong visual supports. So it's not, one of the things I regularly hear is that Sarah, I try choral responding, but not everybody does it, right? So if that's the case, then a couple things to do. One, when we do that, I want to see a cue, I want to see a visual cue from teachers for that choral response. And that does two things. One, it shows students that I'm getting ready to ask a question. Students don't know that I'm about to ask a choral response when I'm just talking, and then all of a sudden I ask a question and I'm expecting a choral response. And so if I hold up my hand, then they know that, oh, I'm about to ask a question that's going to have a choral response. The other thing it does is it lets me do the pace of the response. And so if I don't have this, then my fastest responder controls the pace, and my students who need to think don't actually get to do the thinking that they need. And so if I do that, then I decide when I drop my hand and when the response goes. If I don't get everybody responding, I'm like, oh, we need to go again. Like I didn't have 100%. Or I can say, oh, I heard my friend Jake Daggett. I had the opportunity to watch him recently, and he'll be like, oh, I heard 30% of the boys, or I heard 40% of the girls, and he just makes up a percentage and says a gender, and really it's just he heard some of the kids, and so he's like, let's try again, you know, and so yeah. Okay. So you can see that, right? The other thing that I often see in accuracy to watch for is we don't often model. Like the number of times we don't get a model, and you'll see that here. So introducing a new vocabulary word and saying, who knows what this word means, right? We do it because we're trying to engage students, but it takes longer, and we don't have extra time, and it ends up confusing students if we don't have, because students aren't getting our student-friendly definition, and they might not even be getting the right answer, right? Like students, they might get a fully different example, they might get a fully different definition. So I want to make sure, I want to do that. So that's something I see often. We also want to make sure that we have students practicing those things that we make sure that they're accurate with, and that we're having everybody. So I want you to put a star next to this, and this afternoon when you're in your groups, have a conversation about this slide, and then have a conversation, what other things in your building do you see related to accuracy that might be things that you come back and remind teachers about, or have conversations around PD. If you do have a conversation about the instructional hierarchy, how we learn, that might be good conversations around explicit instruction, good reminders, good going deeper things, right? Okay, so now let's talk about automaticity in practice with our final 10 minutes. So automaticity is just about practice. We don't have enough practice, but it's really important. And practice there are different kinds of ways that we think about practice. So the you do is one type of practice, but it's the deliberate practice that's happening during our explicit instruction, right? That's happening during the I do, we do, you do. but it is the practice where students are getting immediate feedback from us so that we can clear up any misunderstandings before they're going out and practicing on their own. But the practice may or may not have as much teacher-led feedback with it, depending on where students are at. But all of our students need miles and miles on the road. Just like they might get 2-a-days in the summer of practice for a sport, we need as much reading and math practice as we can get. Because if we want them to hit mastery, the point where they will remember it forever, and a middle school or high school teacher won't say, did you ever show them a fraction or a decimal? Right? Then we know that we need lots and lots of practice. That was a joke. Okay, and so we know that practice is what leads to mastery, and there are a few different types of practice, and so I'm gonna very quickly. I warned you guys that I put in too much, right? I warned you I was gonna do this. All right, I feel badly, but I'm leaving you with a couple things. So there are some important types of practice. I'm actually gonna hone in on two of them really quickly that I think are really helpful right now at this time of year. One is spaced practice. So spaced practice is practicing in small chunks across time. I had a teacher in last year who, it was actually a coach last year who took, for students who were making some progress but not quite enough in interventions, she took extra practice materials and put them in a workroom in like folders, and then had a sign up on the back, and then told leaders, and then would send out regular emails and said, if you practice with a student, grab this, go practice with a student, sign your name up on the back, and then every time you do, I will put your name in for a drawing. And then they had like gift cards or something, like she had something for them. And so every time they practiced, and then she would send out regular reminder emails like, hey, if you need to brighten up your day, go read with the kid. And then she got like lots of extra practice. So that spaced practice matters. It's why we have our kids practice piano every single day, right? Not just once a week. It matters. And then the other type is cumulative. Cumulative practice is why decodable books matter. We cannot skip decodables in lessons. Because they come at the end of your lessons, I am warning you, if you are not in a classroom right now and you're like, well, Sarah, I know all of my teachers are using the decodables. They have them. They're in their curriculum. Like, they might not all be using them because they come at the end of the lessons and they're out of time, and they're also reporting to me around the country that they're too hard for their kids. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this is what some of your teachers are running into. And here's what that means. It means that they need more explicit instruction with the earlier parts, which goes back to that idea, is everybody doing everything, right? Do they need more opportunities to participate? A couple tricks. I don't have to spend a lot of extra time planning to flip through the book and pull out the decodable words that match today's pattern, throw them up on the whiteboard, and say, when we're doing the blending part of the activity of the lesson, say, oh, and look, these are the words that are going to be in our decodable today. Let's sound them out now and practice them. And I do it during blending, and then I do it really quickly again right before we read the decodable. The other thing I do is kick the time out, where if the lesson says I read the decodable first, that to me is silly. Because decodable is all about kids practicing. Why do I need to read it? It is not thrilling literature. That's not the point. That's why I have a read aloud. That's the whole different part of the lesson. That's not the point of the decodable. And so I'm not doing it. And so that saves me time too. And so we also, like, that saves time. And so instead, I'm going to sound out the words instead that are the decodable words the kids are going to encounter when they're reading the decodable. Okay. And then also I can scaffold. I can teach teachers to scaffold the decodable book reading Read, like I recommend looking at this also. This is another one you can put a star by. This is also something that teachers can do to look at this afternoon. This is also something that you can take back to your teachers and look at teachers doing in small groups or large group for students as they need more teacher support or less teacher support with decodables when they get to those parts of lessons. But we can't skip it. It's cumulative practice, super duper important for our students. Okay, so great conversations to have this afternoon. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is this. So I am a very special type of nerd that sometimes reads research articles, even from like a million years ago. And when I was writing this book, I read this research article because I don't like to cite things. I feel like it's like a game of telephone. If you cite something that somebody else cited, and that they cited maybe from somebody else citing it, that maybe somebody else cited, and so I don't like it. I have to read, I have to have eyes on print to cite something. And so this is a Joyce and Showers article. They were like some of the first people who researched what is now instructional coaching, but it wasn't called that then. And so they had an article that's very highly cited. And so I was rereading it for this book. And it was actually over like Christmas break a few years ago now. And in the article, they talked about the data that everybody's always talking about from this article. And then the second half of the article, they were interviewing a college football coach. And it was very interesting. I couldn't tell you what his name was because Bravo TV is my sport. But it was very interesting. And it was interesting to me because the very first thing I thought was, oh, like I bet athletes take their jobs very personally. And teachers, we take our jobs very personally, right? And I put the very long quote on here. It's on there for the last sentence. But the idea is that the quote is, the difference between athletes and teachers is that athletes do not believe mastery will be achieved quickly or easily. But we have often behaved as though teaching skills were so easily acquired that a simple presentation, a one-day workshop, or 3 hours at SCOE, or a single videotape demonstration, for some of you, that's like a TikTok, it's like a YouTube video, but for really old people and a VHS tape, were sufficient to ensure successful classroom performance. And then this is the reason it's on a slide. To the extent we have communicated that message to teachers, we have probably misled them. To the extent we have communicated that message to teachers, we have probably misled them. And so for all of this work, right, like I don't know how many ideas, right? Clearly too many, because I've skipped over half the slides probably. Way too many ideas. Like for all of the ideas that we have, like teachers have the hardest jobs. And so while we know that we have to have urgency, for the next 45 days we have to have urgency even, to continue to improve reading outcomes for our students, we also have to make sure that we're supporting our teachers and that we continue to have a message for our teachers that we appreciate what they're doing and that we're alongside them and that growth is growth for all of us and that it's okay that all of us are continuing to grow and that we expect that it's hard for all of us, that it's hard for them, that it's hard for us as leaders who continue to learn, and that we're all learning together as a team. And so I leave you with that. I really do hope that you got something today that made it worth your day out of the building and that you have a fantastic afternoon of getting to plan together with your team or with new people that you've gotten to meet today. And I truly appreciate your time, like truly, and wish you the best rest of the school year. Thank you so much.